All right, hey, Herdwatch viewers. So we are out here in the great outdoors. I will be talking to you guys about the camera setup I'm using on my other channel over at Modern Samurai TV. But right now I was on Facebook right before I came out here, and there were some people talking about the North Korean treaty, and I figured I would do a video, and then I decided I would get out of the house real quick and run down here and do a video. So here we are. What I want to talk to you guys about is the recent meeting between Donald Trump and the North Korean leader. I'm just going to call him Rocket Man because that's kind of his name. So it's interesting to watch people react to this. Scott Adams has a fantastic set of videos about how Donald Trump's continued success sort of causes a cognitive dissonance, like a serious cognitive problem in a significant portion of the country who really just spent a lot of time never imagining a world where Donald Trump would be president, let alone a world where Donald Trump would be reasonably good at it. So, and we see this played out with the North Korean deal, and it's impossible to have a conversation about our talking to North Korea without somebody bringing up and talking about our deal with Iran. So I'm going to talk about the North Korean situation, both the pros and some of the criticisms, and then we will jump over and compare and contrast as necessary with the deal Barack Obama made with Iran. And that way this video will serve as a response to the thread that I'm in, and it will also be a good video for you guys to pay attention to. So let's recap briefly sort of a history of North Korean relations with the region and with the United States, basically for the last pre-Trump era, for as far back as is relevant to this. North Korea exists as a Chinese puppet state, a puppet regime. In other words, China doesn't really have allies in the same way the Soviet Union didn't have allies. You could not have considered Poland an ally of the Soviet Union. They were a vassal state. So China had North Korea that way, and the way it worked was that the North Korean dictating family would sort of keep North Korea under control, and in order to do that without taking undue economic pressure from the rest of the world, the Chinese were their lifeline, a primary driver of their economy, primary supplier of military goods, and as an end result, the North Korean government was completely dependent on Beijing for its very existence. And when you're a dictator, and you're living in a country where everyone is starving, because that's what happens under communism and dictatorships, you really want to stay at the top. It's not like you're getting voted out of office, right? You're getting voted out of office, you're probably getting killed, and probably everyone in your family is getting killed, including all your children, sort of on into perpetuity. Hold that thought for a moment. We're just checking our audio levels. Okay, we seem to be doing well. So you really want to hold on to power, particularly if you're the kind of person who becomes a dictator somewhere like North Korea to start with. So, and that's sort of the way it went, right? Because in order to get North Korea to change, you're not going to appeal to their better nature. You're not going to appeal to they're not suddenly going to become humanitarians. It's an oppressive regime, and they're going to stay a repressive regime. And they're going to stay under the control of the Chinese because there was no credible alternative. By credible alternative, I mean one that was a good deal not only for the North Korean people, but for the North Korean leadership, and did not put them at risk of simply being murdered and swapped out by the Chinese for someone who would be more helpful. So that's sort of where we've been. And in that way, emboldened by the Chinese, the North Koreans have been pursuing nuclear weapons. They've been pursuing, they've been sort of rattling their saber every time China wanted them to see how the West would jump. And a series of leaders in the West who were weak, who do not know how to negotiate, who do not understand what it means to deal with these kind of people, your Barack Obama type people, your Merkels, this sort of whole slew of globalist, capital communists, the kind of that collectivist thing that's kind of coming out of the EU. They have no capability for dealing with the North Koreans. And this is why Europe was powerless to stop the Soviet Union. This is why Europe was powerless to stop Berlin at the time when the World War II, when the Germans were rising. It's why Europe is always powerless in the face of their homegrown sort of dictatorships. It's because they're weak. They're collectivist autocrats, and they have no real understanding of what it's like to stand up for anything, let alone to stand up to someone who's willing to point a gun to their head. This is why it took Ronald Reagan, backed by the might of the United States, to bring the Soviet Union down. And in this case, this is why it's taken Donald Trump, backed by the United States military, to force North Korea to the table. Now, I'm not laying this all at the feet of Donald Trump. A couple of interesting things happened. One, Rocket Man took over the reins of power in North Korea. Now, whether you believe the idea that he naturally succeeded to this post, or whether what makes more sense is that he murdered his family members and took into this spot. The important thing is this. This is a guy who enjoys the finer things that the West has to offer. He's not like his dad that way. He wants to be genuinely adored by his people. He wants access to Western culture. He wants Xbox. He wants to go to the G7 summits or wherever. He wants to be free to sort of moderate his own world a little bit. Don't misunderstand me. He's not going to turn North Korea into a democracy, but what he doesn't want to be anymore is a Chinese puppet state with no freedom of his own. He basically is a dictator, or wants to be kind of his own dictator. Instead of just sitting in his oppressive castle, sort of grinding his people into the dust, what he would rather do, or how he sees himself, is as a benevolent dictator who's going to raise up the lives of his people, and they will in return love him, actually love him as much as his advisors tell him they love him now, while he kicks back and bangs Western pop stars and plays Xbox and gets to go to movie premieres. You're looking at a guy who's kind of obsessed with Western culture and Western celebrity, and he has no access to those things. So he's dying to open North Korea up to Western culture. What he doesn't understand is how corrosive it is. And this is why the true dictators don't let us anywhere near it. They know that once your people are watching Baywatch, once they're lusting after the latest version of the Tesla, once they're, more concerned with Kim Kardashian than they are with how evil capitalism is, it becomes very, very hard to keep them down. And once they start thinking for themselves, then they start aspiring for more. And then capitalism rears its ugly head. So he thinks he can kind of keep a lid on this, that he can bring part of Western culture in, but maintain that sort of dictatorship control. And what we know, what Donald Trump understands, what most of us who believe in capitalism understand, and what the leaders of Beijing understood, and what Kim's dad understood, was that capitalism cannot be controlled. You let it in, you let people start seeing our culture, and think for themselves, and they want more of it. So this crack, this opening, this moment in time where this guy, this sort of young guy who's yearning to put his mark on his nation, we have this brief window of opportunity where he's looking beyond the Chinese, and he needs a lifeline. You need to offer him something. He doesn't feel bad. He's not driven by guilt, which is something the European leaders just fundamentally can't understand. So you can't say that he wants to be better. He doesn't want to be better. What he wants is a better life. And if he makes his life better for his people and they adore him more because of it, then fantastic. He'll take the adoration, right? So it's in this context that we see the perfect moment for a guy like Donald Trump to be president, because Donald Trump understands making a deal with people who have their own interests that don't necessarily align with yours, making a deal with people you don't have to agree 100% with. And this is where we are. So what Donald Trump did was what Dennis Rodman did was use his celebrity to become friends with Kim. And by all accounts, he slipped Rocket Man a copy of The Art of the Deal. And what Kim found out from the art of the deal was that you can get things from the people around you by win-win compromise. And you kind of saw him try and play that game. So, you know, Rodman kind of got the in, and then we started getting discussions with Donald Trump, but the first thing that Kim tried to do was what he always does with Western leaders, right? Which is bluster and saber rattle and threaten. And Donald Trump simply did the one thing that Kim couldn't handle. He ridiculed him on the world stage. He gave him the same offer that Donald Trump gives everybody, right? The only offer that Donald Trump is prepared to make, because he's not a leg breaker, and that was this: you can work with me, in which case I will consider you and tell everyone that you're a smart, hard-driving business guy. So even if we disagree, but if you're negotiating in good faith, then if you win a round and I lose, I'm gonna say, hey, you're a good negotiator for your people and no harm done. It's like, it's like a game of touch football in the park. You're gonna win some, I'm gonna win some. If you're not negotiating, if you're not playing ball, then you are the dumbest person that ever walked the earth. And if you dare put your hand anywhere near that button, we are gonna stomp you into the dirt. And when China looks over your shoulder funny, like your bigger brother, and goes, hey, we're protecting North Korea, what did Donald Trump do? He immediately leapfrogged past all conventional diplomacy and made China responsible directly for the actions of North Korea, something no one had the guts to do openly before. So Trump is like, hey, you're the ones protecting them. You expect me to not touch North Korea because you'll retaliate? You have this mutual pact? Well, that's great. North Korea starts some shit, we're taking you down too, China. So you had better get your act together. And what that did was it forced China to back off. For the first time in I cannot tell you how long, if you go look at the UN, China abstained from a resolution condemning North Korea's actions. In other words, in a world where China could have just reached out and with their veto power just snuffed a rebuke that went to the North Koreans, China had to abstain as a way to distance themselves from being tied with North Koreans' actions. And that wedge, that moment, the brilliance of that is that that's what cracked open. That's what gave Rocket Man a little bit of freedom of action and led him to ask himself, what if I was operating in a world where I was something other than just a Chinese puppet? And it was at that moment in time, I guarantee you, that the Trump administration started making real overtures to Kim. And what did he do? He started crudely playing the art of the deal, right? Thinking that Trump was a conventional politician. So what did he do? He starts being nice to Donald Trump, waits for Donald Trump to say a couple of nice things about him. He kind of goes and visits South Korea a little bit. And then right around the time when he thinks that Trump is vulnerable, because what he believed was that what would have been true of Obama, which is that now that, Trump said something nice like, Kim is a strong negotiator for his country or whatever, then Kim, what did he do? He threatened to pull out of the talks. And he got tough again, because that's the moment when a leader like Barack Obama would have crumbled and given in anything to keep the positive momentum and that public illusion that they were allies alive. What did Donald Trump do? The moment Kim tried to basically play that game, because what he did was his people called the Trump administration up and said, I see you're getting a lot of good press because you're making progress with us. And the Trump people are like, yeah, it's great for us. Even CNN has to admit that we're doing a good job. And then Kim went, oh, it'd be a shame if something were to happen to that. And we shut down the negotiations and you looked like an idiot on the world stage. And somebody in their group went, why don't you go check Twitter? Because Donald Trump has no problem at all going, well, I thought things were going well, but it turns out Rocket Man's just an idiot. And by the way, did I mention he's fat? And oh, well, I guess we'll have to just nuke them into the Stone Age if they get out of line. like that, and it's not fickle. People say it's unpredictable, but it's completely predictable. What happened was Kim thought that he had Trump over a barrel because of public opinion, and what he doesn't understand is that Donald Trump doesn't give a crap about what the media is saying about him. He doesn't care about the American media. And right on cue, what did the American media do? Exactly what the North Koreans thought they were going to do. CNN went 24/7. Donald Trump fucks up the peace negotiations. Kim Jong-il pulls back. We told you this was going to happen all along. He played Trump for a fool. It's all falling apart. And all Donald Trump did, step back two, kick Kim in the nuts, and say, fine. You don't want to talk, don't talk. You're back to being an idiot. And they gained no leverage. And what happened a week after? Right back in the negotiating table. Right back. So anyway, I'm rambling on, right? So now we get to this part where what Kim realizes is that he cannot manipulate Donald Trump with the court of public opinion. What Donald Trump knows is that Kim desperately wants to be free of China, that he loves access to celebrity. And what Donald Trump knows, and Kim doesn't, is that if you can open the doors to North Korea, just like when you started opening the doors to the Soviet Union, just like when you started opening the doors to East Berlin, that the Western culture and capitalism just roars in the same way it's doing in China. China doesn't know it, but they're getting eaten from the inside alive by capitalism. Okay? So, Donald Trump goes off. They have their meeting. Not only do they have their meeting, but Donald Trump left the G7 summit to go have that meeting. In other words, what did he offer Kim in that gesture? You are a world leader. You are a force to be reckoned with on the stage of nations. You are someone to be dealt with. And Jim Acosta will tell you that that's horrible, that elevating a guy like Kim is a bad idea. And yet, here's the thing, you elevate him, and when you have that personality that Kim has, he doesn't want that taken away. That's why he thought that was a threat against Donald Trump. What he didn't realize was that Trump doesn't care, but Trump knows that Kim does care. So now, Donald Trump walked out of the G7 to go talk to Kim. He goes, they talk, they have their meeting, and what did they walk away with? Did they have an agreement? Do we have a denuclearized North Korea? No, but we were never going to have that in one meeting. It was never, ever, ever going to happen that way. All we got, and all we needed, and all we were ever going to get out of this meeting was an agreement to meet again, a positive event on the world stage, and everybody to walk away stronger. And that's the lesson Donald Trump is showing Kim. Negotiate in good faith, and you walk away stronger. But only stronger in the ways that we allow you to be. Is Kim free to go back to building nuclear weapons as a result of this meeting? No. In fact, the moment he does go back, even though he hasn't agreed to rip down all of his nukes right now, even though we don't have a treaty, if he goes home and starts building nukes, everything he accomplished this time, done. We are no worse off than we were before. Right? We have nothing to lose, except a little bit of time and some jet fuel for Air Force One. Okay, so Kim got treated like a force to be reckoned with. Kim got some positive press at home. Kim got a little bit of breathing room, right, from the Chinese, because the Chinese can't slam down on him right now while he's actively negotiating with the United States. They need to try and shore up their relationship with him so that they have some influence over the agreement he eventually makes with us. So the Chinese are treating him better. We're treating him better. He's more important on the world stage, and he looks like an enlightened, forward-thinking guy as opposed to his dad or his uncles or the rest of his family. And that buys him some breathing room at home. And that was it. All we agreed to do was talk again. And we're going to hold off, maybe, on war games with South Korea something we're doing with the blessing of the South Korean government. Because the only thing those war games ever did, they're not a training exercise. We know what we're doing. It's not like the joint NATO operations in Europe where we were practicing coordinating between 15 nations and there were tens of thousands of miles to cover and, you know, all that stuff. This is not that, right? This was getting a bunch of guys in a truck, 20,000 troops in a truck between two nations and driving them up and forth on the border. We know how to do that in South Korea. So we don't need the exercises. All the exercises ever were was a show of power to rattle the cage of the North Koreans to get them to talk to us. But they're talking. So why in the world would we put 30,000 troops on the border with loaded guns, march them up and down to intimidate the North Koreans? They're already so fucking intimidated. They're in peace discussions with South Korea, and they've agreed to come to the White House and have a meeting with us. So of course, we'll back down the show of force just a little bit, but we're not withdrawing troops. We haven't signed any sort of non-aggression pact. We haven't lifted sanctions. We haven't given them an agreement that denuclearization is off the table. We gave them nothing, except we're not going to hold a military exercise that we don't need. And we signed a piece of paper that says it was good to have a meeting with you. That's it. That's all it cost us. And the end result, we're having discussions with a regime that would not have picked up the phone 2 years ago. If you don't think that's a win, if you don't understand that these things have to take time, you're out of your mind. And for CNN and the rest of the media and everyone who's listening to them who suddenly thinks we shouldn't be having a conversation with these people if they have human rights violations, these are the same assholes who think that we should normalize relationships with Cuba. Right? These are the same assholes who think we should be taking an arbitrary number of refugees from Iran and Iraq and Syria. These are the same people who will boycott Chick-fil-A for somehow or another being anti-gay, though that doesn't make any sense, yet support Obama kicking pallet loads of cash out of the door to hand to a government in the Middle East that actively throws homosexuals off roofs as a public event. I'm sorry. I don't give a crap whether you think this was a good deal or not. And you're faux sudden caring that anyone we have a conversation with has to have a perfect Western style, not only Western style, but far left California view of human rights before we'll even have a conversation with them. You're the dumbest people on earth. Because if we don't talk to this guy, not only if we don't talk to him, if we don't make it worth his while to be our friend, he goes right back to the Chinese. Right back. And then what do we have? We have a nuclear power right next to South Korea, right back to hate in our guts, who will close their society tighter than anything you've ever seen, and it will be 50 years more before we get another chance to get in there. And the Chinese will laugh. So do I think we should give this guy everything he wants? Hell no. Hell no. But is there room here for a reasonable negotiation, the way we negotiated with the Soviet Union, the way we negotiate with some of the Middle Eastern regimes who are more reasonable than Iran? Absolutely. Absolutely. You deal with them like you deal with any other nation that's acting in its own self-interest. The problem till now is that North Korea was not acting in its self-interest. North Korea was acting in the China's best interest. All right, in any case. So what else do I got to say about this? The Iran deal. So compare and contrast this with the Iran deal, where basically Barack Obama gave Iran literally everything they wanted and huge piles of cash, and did in fact get almost nothing in return. Because what do you think they got? You think they got the end of their nuclear program? Hell no. They got the right to buy all of the equipment they need to build nuclear warheads. All they had to do was promise that they wouldn't misuse it. It's like me giving you all the stuff to build a bomb and you promising you're not gonna just stick the detonator in the plastic stuff, but you're just gonna use it to feed your chickens or some silliness. We gave them all that. Oh, but in the thread, somebody's like, oh, but we got verification treaties. No, we didn't. Have you read the Iran treaty? Do you know that we have to ask their permission? The UN has to ask their permission to send an inspector in. They've agreed not to send it into certain sites that the Iranians consider to be of national interest. And we give them 14 days notice. If the Iranians object, we automatically, there's an appeals process that takes 7 days, and maybe as long as the UN decides to drag its feet before they can come back and go, no, you really do have to let the inspectors in, and Iran goes, or what? And then we have to go through the whole process of arguing about whether or not we're gonna put sanctions back in. So if they decide not to let an inspector in somewhere, they have at least 21 days and possibly forever to get out of there whatever stuff it is they might have been doing wrong. Does that count as verification to you? Don't be an idiot. Don't be an idiot. And I guarantee you that's not the shape of any eventual treaty we might have with North Korea. You mark my words, the North Korean treaty will have unannounced verification. I guarantee you. And what is it going to cost us? HBO and Baywatch? Exactly the sort of access to our culture we want these people to have anyway? Because as communistic and moronic as Hollywood is far to the side of freedom from where North Korea is. You got to pay attention. You got to pay attention to how this stuff is happening. You have to pay attention to how enlightened self-interest people work. And in this case, Donald Trump is giving North Korea, he gave them the breathing room they needed. You think this happened by accident, but it didn't happen by accident. Trump made this happen. He wedged China away from North Korea. And now he's taking that moment to actually teach North Koreans' leadership how to be greedy capitalists who act in their own enlightened self-interest and negotiate with everyone else. Because no matter what compromise we get in that negotiation, it's more than we were going to get when they were a Chinese puppet. Anyway, that's about my time. This is everything I'm going to say on this. I hope you guys keep paying attention. I cannot stress to you enough how much it is worth going and watching Scott Adams' stuff. Go watch this. He's breaking this down perfectly. And you mark my words, this will go down as one of the most amazing foreign relations coups since Ronald Reagan brought down the Berlin Wall. And CNN and the rest of these guys will have nobody but themselves to blame because they missed it. All right, Herdwatchers, make sure you check me out. Herdwatching, Herdwatching. Yeah, I can spell. Also, check out Riding Herd, RIDINGHERD. Riding Herd is where I post everything that's not a vlog. So links to news articles I'm writing, retweets of other things, what I'm reading, videos, YouTube videos, links to Scott Adams videos. Basically, the stream of consciousness of the stuff I feed my brain that eventually becomes what you guys see on this channel. All right, I hope you're having a fantastic week. We will talk again on the weekend. Have a good one, guys.